Hello everyone, I saw Maxine in the movie theaters this past week. Maxine is the third and final conclusion of Ty West's X series. After waiting for almost 2 years, Maxine is finally here. I've been excited for this movie since I saw Pearl. This has been one of my most anticipated movies this year in the last 2 years. This t-shirt I'm wearing right here, I got this at Monster Mania, and I figured, what better way to go see this movie for the occasion wearing this Maxine/Pearl t-shirt. After surviving the events of X, we see how Maxine is still trying to make it big and famous in Hollywood, how she's trying to go from porn to being a famous Hollywood actress in Hollywood films. While she's trying to be famous, she's running away from her past, but her past catches up to her, and it comes back to haunt her. Also, while this is going on, a serial killer known as the Night Stalker is killing people. This was based on inspired by real-life serial killer, the Night Stalker, was Richard Ramirez in the 80's. This is considered to be one of the most brutal crimes ever at that time. This movie is another example of showing how famous side effects, how Hollywood is bad, evil, and can be corrupt. The first scene in this movie starts off with Maxine auditioning for a movie, goes well, and she got the part. It's funny when Maxine is talking to her friend who works at a video store, asking to name 5 celebrities who got their start in horror movies. He's making the list off his head: Jamie Lee Curtis, John Travolta, Demi Moore, Brooke Shields. He's about to say a 5th one. She interrupts her friend saying her name, Maxine fucking Minx. A nice reference and tribute to how some actors who were nobodies started their career in horror movies and they became famous. Mia Goth once again does a good job in this movie. She's very badass. She does not take shit from anyone. She's a very complicated character and won't let anyone get in the way of her trying to be famous. There's a scene in this movie when Maxine is walking home from work. She's chased by this guy dressed in a costume, but thankfully it's not the killer. She points her gun at him, asks him to strip naked, and she steps on the guy's nuts. When I saw this part, I was like, damn! In X, Maxine was a brunette. In this movie, she changed her hair color to blonde. Kevin Bacon is in this movie, and he makes a list of famous actors who starred in a horror movie before he was famous. He was in the first Friday the 13th movie. Just like Jamie Lee Curtis, Kevin Bacon embraces how he got his career start in a horror movie and is not afraid and ashamed to admit it. He plays a slimy bastard private investigator working for the Night Stalker. His death scene was not a loss. You can say he's intentionally being a little bit over the top at times. I like the scene with Maxine and the director walking around the studio on the set of the old Psycho set. Later in the movie, I like the chase sequence when Kevin Bacon's character chases Maxine around the Hollywood studio, and she hides inside Norman Bates' old home set. Despite trying to intimidate Maxine, she does not back down. When he is spying on her, she punches him in the face with her keys. Elizabeth Debecki's character plays a stereotypical film director who's very good at directing, but she's described by her peers that she can be a bit of a bitch and difficult sometimes, but can mean well. Lily Collins' character says don't get on her bad side. To me, this sounds like a reference to Stanley Kubrick. She sees a lot of potential in Maxine, seeing how she has a lot of potential to be one of the next great actresses in Hollywood. I'm not gonna lie, I've never heard of this actress before. Her and Maxine know what it's like to be a female in the film industry and what it takes to be a big shot in Hollywood. They admire each other, but there's a small sense of tension between the two. But despite that, they have each other's back. I like how the movie starts out with a Betty Davis quote describing Hollywood. In this biz, until you're known as a monster, you're not a star. That's one good way to describe how Hollywood can treat their famous movie stars, how they become big, famous, but become monsters in the end, how the industry treats and looks down upon their beloved, talented movie stars, and how Hollywood ruined them. When Maxine's friends are kidnapped by the Night Stalker, that was scary and intense. It made me feel uncomfortable, and we don't see what happens to them. The 2 cops played by Bobby Cannavale and Michelle Monaghan, these are actors I've enjoyed watching in the past. I'm not sure this is the first time they've done a horror movie in their careers. They play 2 cops trying to solve the murder who the Night Stalker is. Maxine refuses to talk to the cops. She's afraid of her past going out to the public, worried that it'll ruin her chances of being a famous actress and that a scandal will ruin her reputation. Bobby Cannavale's the bad cop when he asks Maxine's question on the murders of her friends who are being killed one by one. When they catch the killer before he dies, apparently it's mentioned that he wanted to be an actor, but he never made it. He dies on by the Hollywood sign after being shot a few times. Michelle Monaghan's character was the good cop and tried to let Maxine know if she knew anything, she could try to help them. She sees how all these killings are connected to her and that she could become the next target. But Maxine thinks she can't help her solve the crime until she thinks about what her friend said earlier about these rich people's location address, and this leads to the possibility who the killer is, which I'll cover soon in this video. These two did a good job. I wish they had a little more screen time. Giancarlo Esposito plays Maxine's agent. He really cared about Maxine, made sure she was well taken care of, and he had her back. This is the second horror movie I've seen him in this year. He was in Abigail. I originally wanted to do a video on that movie, but I got sidetracked. Hopefully I'll do one down the road. Just like Abigail, doesn't have a big part in this movie. The movie's a nice 1980s aesthetics, visual vibe atmosphere, and paying tribute to the decade of the 1980s. When Maxine and her friend are walking home from work, the movie theater is showing St. Elmo's fire. I don't think Maxine will not be a member of the Brat Pack. I also like when they show like 1980s news footage of important events that happened in the 80s, like for example, Ronald Reagan during Reaganomics, cocaine was the lethal deadly addicted drug of the 80s, PMR, people protesting, boycotting porn, horror movies, and heavy metal music being considered satanic. If my friend and buddy Wolfman Sam was doing this video with me, he would explain this event in heavy metal history. The scenery of LA was cool to see someone dressed up as Charlie Chaplin. Maxine dumped her cigarette on Theda Bora's Walk of Fame, especially that was referencing Pearl, was a fan of the silent movie star Theda Bora, and the alligator's name was Theda. With this movie taking place in the 80s, we see Maxine behind the scenes of this horror movie she's making. I'm not sure what that stuff was the makeup artist put on her face for the prosthetics. We see how when Maxine is waiting for the sub to drive for 10 minutes, she's feeling claustrophobic and having a panic attack thinking about her past when Pearl snuck up behind her in a very creepy way. My first thought was the killer was going to be in this scene melting the stuff on her face to burn. I'm sitting in the movie theater thinking to myself, House of Wax or Tourist Trap, but no, that's not the case right here. As I was watching this movie in the movie theaters, now that this is true, I'm thinking to myself, this could be a possible tribute to special effects makeup artists of talents like Rick Baker and Tom Savini. It's a little gore, but not very over the top with the gore. It has that Giallo Italian horror feel in the style of Dario Argento. The Night Stalker killer costume, all dressed in black, reminding me of Mario Bava's Blood and Black Lace. It also has a film noir vibe feel to it also. If you're a fan of Giallo Italian horror movies like I am, this one is definitely for you. But I'll admit, there's still a lot of other Italian Giallo horror movies I still need to see. Some fans have pointed out it also has a little Brian De Palma vibe, like Dressed to Kill is one example. It's not a grindhouse exploitation feel style movie like X was. Another movie example that captured the Dario Argento vibe feeling, spirit feel a few years ago was Neon Demon. If you haven't seen this movie yet, stop the video right here. Okay, this part I'm about to talk about was a little tricky for me. I had to watch and listen to other people's perspective on the final climax of this movie, and I also need to give myself a little time to think about this part to let it sink in for me. I didn't hate or think the final climax was good, I just did not know what to make of it when I was watching this in the movie theaters. In my X video, I mentioned how will Maxine be the next killer, and boy was I wrong. Seeing the trailer like all of us, this is what drew me to the movie. Who is the killer in this movie? How does the killer know about Maxine's past, and how is this all connected? Seeing this in the movie theaters, I had no idea what to expect who the killer was going to be. I don't know why, my first thought was the killers can't be related to Howard and Pearl because they had no children or grandchildren, and I'm not sure there are any other living relatives that I was aware of. When the killers were revealed, it was a shock that the killer was her father. Before they said the killer was Maxine's father, my first reaction, who was this? It did not cross my mind. We didn't see the dad that much in this movie, except for a flashback in the opening scene, hearing his voice talking to Maxine when she was a little girl. In my X vid, I mentioned that the preacher in the TV was hinted that was Maxine's father, and I was right on that one. The satanic ritual called sacrifice felt like something out of Eyes Wide Shut, and it was weird. It was an okay final climax scene between Maxine and her father that takes place at the Hollywood sign. Despite not knowing much about Maxine and her father's relationship, it sounded strange they drifted apart when she wanted to become a movie star, and her father thinks sex porn is a sin. From seeing how her father is, he sounded like he was a real piece of shit, and he was a religious pastor. He was trying to force her to convert her to do divine intervention, but she refused, and that's what led him wanting to kill her. Thinking his daughter was filthy, that she was the devil. Quite the opposite, he was the devil. What's also weird, before the third and final act, revealing who the killer was, we saw him watching his daughter strip and do exotic stripping dances in front of him. Little do we know at the time what the foreshadow was going to be. Before, my mindset was thinking how the killer lusts over a woman and wanted to kill her, but this was a disturbing, uncomfortable incest. Some fans have pointed that the third act was not done perfectly. I can see why that is, but at the same time, it did not bother me as much. They wanted this to be more sinister and darker. Also, another reason why the third act has room for some people is because it throws too much stuff in. It's hard to grasp and put all the puzzle pieces together. It's a little underdeveloped and not written as well as it could have been. It did not seem to satisfy the audiences. When you go into this movie, you might be a little disappointed with the third act. At the same time, this is not a bad movie by all means. It makes you wonder, did Ty West have a fast production with this movie? Or maybe it could have some student interference, but who knows? All three of Ty West's X movies were good on different levels. Between these three movies, you don't have to watch X before Pearl because Pearl was a prequel. But you need to watch X first before this movie to understand how it references events that happen in X. You don't need to watch Pearl before Maxine, but still highly recommend you go watch Pearl on your own terms. In X and Pearl, we get post-credit teases, but not this movie. While this was a good movie, honestly in my own opinion, I liked Pearl the best one of the series. I think it's because fans love and got spoiled with Pearl just like me. They were expecting more out of this, and fans were expecting a good final conclusion of this series. But still, Mia Goth does a good job as usual and gives it her all, like she's trying to win an Academy Award. But some people point out wishing there was more to this character Maxine than they expected. In Pearl, you had a great character analysis who did not become a famous movie star like she wanted to, accepted her fate as it was. In this movie, we see how hard work, dedication, what it took for Maxine to be big and famous, and the price she paid for. Not giving up on her dreams. For a minute there, I thought she had become famous and made it big, but I didn't realize it was all in her head. Kind of like the ending of Taxi Driver being all in his head. I said this before in my X and Pearl video, sorry for the repeat. X was exploitation slasher grindhouse Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Pearl was classic Hollywood Golden Age cinema. Also, the character Pearl was a study analysis. Maxine is 80s Hollywood mixed in with murder mystery and Italian Giallo horror. Despite this movie being the style of Giallo, does that mean this movie will be good or worse for you? Well, it depends. Despite loving 80s movies and recent film directors paying tribute to 1980s, it's got a little bit overboard. I'm feeling burnt out. Don't get me wrong, I love the 80s, but there comes a time where it just burns you out and you want to see a tribute to a different era. Some fans are already saying this is a perfect horror trilogy. Well, in my own opinion, I would not say it was a perfect trilogy. It was one of the good and better horror trilogies I've seen in a long time in horror movies. Despite the rumors on this being the last of the Ty West X movies, never say never, who knows? As a horror fan, we know this will not be the last one. As a joke, Maxine in space, or as I showed my friend on Instagram, Maxine vs. Terrifier, but that would not make any sense. Two different slasher movies. Or maybe a movie about Maxine in her older lady years being a retired actress, looking back reflecting her career and success in Hollywood as an actress. If they do or don't make any more, I can see them taking a break for a little while, leaving this on a good note, and see what happens in the near future. While this movie was not perfect, I'm still glad I've seen this in the movie theaters for the fun of it and the experience. If you like the last two movies, I highly recommend you go checking this one out. I'll still add this to my movie collection, I might as well, since I own both X and Pearl on Blu-ray. Also, maybe I'll give this movie more rewatches. I might consider a redo on this movie, but not yet. That wraps up Ty West's X series. I will not accept a life that I do not deserve. You're a fucking movie star. One day the whole world is gonna know my name.